The horrible death of Maximo Gorky. The complete history. Who was Maximum Gorky? Maxim Gorky, whose real name was Alexei Maksimovich Peshkov, was a prominent Russian writer and politician, known for his activism in the Russian revolutionary movement and his founding of the socialist realism literary movement. Despite being nominated 5 times for the Nobel Prize in Literature, his success as a writer came after several years of frequently changing jobs and touring throughout the Russian Empire, which influenced his writing. His most notable works are found in the novel, including The Underworld and The Mother. Gorky was friends with other Russian writers such as Leo Tolstoy and Anton Chekhov, and was closely associated with Vladimir Lenin and Aleksandr Bogdanov's Bolshevik wing of the emerging Marxist Social Democratic movement. Although he spent much of his life in exile, he returned to Russia at the invitation of Joseph Stalin in 1932, and died there in June 1936. In honor of his legacy, Gorky's hometown of Nizhny Novgorod was named after him in 1932 to 1990. Maxim Gorky was born on March 28, 1868, March 16, according to the old Julian calendar used in Russia at the time, in Nizhny Novgorod. Unfortunately, he was orphaned at the age of 11 and had to be raised by his grandmother. At the age of 12, he left school in 1880 to learn different trades, such as working in a store, joining a ship, or working as a baker. In 1887, after a suicide attempt, Gorky decided to travel the entire Russian Empire on foot for 5 years. During this time, he changed jobs frequently and accumulated a large number of experiences that significantly influenced his literary work. In his early years, Gorky worked for provincial newspapers and wrote under the pseudonym Jehudiel Jlamada. However, in 1892, while working for the newspaper The Caucasus in Tbilisi, he began using the pen name Gorky, which means bitter in Russian, reflecting his discontent with life in Russia and his determination to tell the truth, even if it was bitter. His first book, Essays and Stories, was published in 1898 and was a great success. Gorky wrote tirelessly, considering literature as a moral and political act capable of changing the world, rather than as an aesthetic practice. In his works, Gorky depicted the lives of people from the lowest and most marginal strata of society, exposing the privations, humiliations, and brutalities they faced, but also the spark of humanity that existed within them. Gorky became a distinctive literary voice for the underprivileged sections of society, and his position as a passionate advocate for Russia's social, political, and cultural transformation was entrenched. Prior to 1899, Gorky was known for being a supporter of the emerging Marxist Social Democratic movement, which led to his becoming an influential figure both among the intelligentsia and the growing conscious working population. At the core of his work is a belief in the inherent value and potential of the human person. Gorky contrasts individuals aware of their natural dignity and motivated by energy and will, with those who surrender to the degrading conditions of their environment. His writings and letters show a restless man struggling to reconcile conflicting feelings of faith and skepticism, love of life and disgust for the vulgarity and pettiness of the human world. In 1902, he published his most famous work, The Mother, which recounted the struggle of Russian workers against Tsarist oppression. As Gorky became an increasingly influential figure, he also became involved in politics, becoming a close supporter of Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. After the October Revolution of 1917, Gorky became an active member of the Soviet government and worked to establish a proletarian culture. In 1921, he founded the literary magazine Literaturная Gazeta, which became a major literary publication in the Soviet Union. Despite his close relationship with the Soviet government, Gorky was also critical of the direction of the country. In particular, he opposed Stalin's cultural policy and denounced the persecution of artists and intellectuals. These criticisms, along with concerns about his own safety, led to Gorky's mysterious death in 1936. Discover history in an entertaining and fascinating way. Subscribe to our cultural channel. Join us on an exciting journey through time and space as we explore the secrets and mysteries of the past. Don't miss any of our updates and share it with your friends so they can join in on the fun too. By the end of 1935, Gorky had fallen ill and had retired to his home on the Black Sea coast. Despite reports that he was improving, he died on June 18, 1936, at the age of 68. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but since then, there have been many theories as to what really happened. Some theories suggest that Gorky was poisoned by agents of the Soviet government due to his support for the political opposition and his criticism of the regime. Other theories suggest that he was assassinated on Stalin's orders due to a personal dispute or as a way to send a message to other dissidents. It has also been speculated that Gorky could have committed suicide due to depression or despair over his political and personal situation. However, none of these theories has been confirmed. After his death, an official investigation was carried out, but the results were never made public, and some documents related to Gorky's death were destroyed. This has led to continued speculation about what really happened and has made it difficult to separate fact from fiction. What is known for certain is that Gorky's death was a major blow to Soviet literature and culture. Gorky had been a major figure in Russian literature since the publication of his first work in 1892, and his work had been praised by figures such as Tolstoy and Chekhov. He had also been a political activist and had supported the October Revolution and the Soviet regime in its early years. However, as Soviet politics became more oppressive and authoritarian, Gorky began to criticize the regime and make calls for intellectual freedom. Maxim Gorky's death remains a mystery and has been the subject of speculation and conspiracy theories for decades. Although what actually happened has never been confirmed, his death was a great loss to Soviet literature and culture. Gorky had been an influential figure in Russian literature and politics for decades, and his legacy remains important to this day. One of the most popular theories is that Gorky was assassinated on the orders of Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union at the time. Stalin is believed to have viewed Gorky as a potential threat to his power and was concerned by his criticism of the policies of the Soviet Communist Party. According to this theory, Gorky was poisoned with cyanide by agents of the NKVD, the Soviet State Security Agency, at his home on the Black Sea coast. This theory is based on several factors. Firstly, there are reports that Gorky was in good health before his death, suggesting that his death was sudden and possibly provoked. Furthermore, Gorky had been critical of Stalin and the Soviet regime in the past, which might have led Stalin to see him as a potential threat. Furthermore, after Gorky's death, his personal files and manuscripts were confiscated by the NKVD, suggesting that the Soviet regime was interested in controlling his legacy and removing any potentially incriminating material. It has also been reported that the doctor who signed Gorky's death certificate was forced by the NKVD to do so quickly and without a full autopsy. However, despite the popularity of this theory, there is no conclusive evidence that Gorky was assassinated on the orders of Stalin or anyone else. Some historians have argued that Gorky's death may have simply been the result of disease or natural causes, and that conspiracy theories are largely based on unsubstantiated speculation and hearsay. Another theory is that Gorky died of natural causes, but that his death was used by the Soviet regime as an opportunity to eliminate other writers and political dissidents. In the so-called writers' case of 1937, several prominent writers were arrested and charged with treason and espionage. These arrests are believed to have been largely in retaliation for Gorky's death and a way to weed out critics of the regime. The 1937 case of the writers was part of a larger campaign known as the Moscow Trials, in which large numbers of people were charged with treason and conspiracy against the Soviet state. Many of the accused were prominent military, political, and cultural leaders, and it is believed that the accusations were largely fabricated. Among the accused writers were Ilya Ehrenburg, Isaac Babel, and Boris Pilniak, who had been critical of the regime and had expressed disagreement with the direction the country was taking. The Soviet regime is believed to have used Gorky's death as an opportunity to get rid of these dissidents and silence any opposition. Many of the writers were tortured and forced to confess to crimes they had not committed. Some were publicly executed, while others were sent to forced labor camps. The case of the writers and the Moscow trials in general are considered one of the worst political purges in the history of the Soviet Union. Despite numerous theories about the death of Maxim Gorky, what actually happened remains a mystery. What is clear is that his death had a significant impact on the culture and politics of the Soviet Union. Gorky's influence on Russian and world literature is still evident today, but his legacy is also remembered as a victim of the Soviet regime's political repression and violence. A little more about Gorky. If you like our content and you are not subscribed yet, subscribe, like, and share, so you help us make more videos. Thank you. Legacy and influence in the world. Maxim Gorky is recognized as one of the greatest Russian writers of the 20th century, and his work has left a lasting mark on world literature. His writings, which reflect the lives of the poor and marginalized in society, have been considered a chronicle of the time and a social and political critique. His literary style, characterized by the precision in the description of reality and the psychological depth of the characters, has been a great influence on Russian and world literature. In addition to his literary legacy, Gorky has also been a leading advocate for social justice and free speech. His commitment to the socialist cause and his support for the October Revolution of 1917 led him to be a cultural and political leader in the Soviet Union. However, his disillusionment with the Soviet regime and his criticism of abuses of power led him to be marginalized and censored by the authorities. Despite this, his legacy as a writer and his fight for social justice have made him a symbol of resistance and the fight for human rights. His work continues to be studied and appreciated around the world, and his name is associated with the voice of the oppressed and marginalized. Maxim Gorky is known as one of the most influential writers in Russian and Soviet literature. Some of his best-known works include The Mother, 1907, a novel that tells the story of a working mother and her fight for social justice. The Underworld, 1902, a play featuring life in a Moscow slum and the difficulties the characters face in order to survive. Childhood, 1913, an autobiography chronicling Gorky's childhood in Russia. My University, 1923, a collection of essays in which Gorky reflects on his life and career as a writer. Gorky's writing had a great influence on Russian and Soviet literature. His works address social and political issues and focus on the problems of the working class and the poor. Gorky was also an advocate of revolution and communism and worked closely with the Soviet Communist Party. His legacy extends far beyond Russian literature, as his works have been translated into numerous languages and read around the world. In addition, Gorky's life and work have inspired many writers and artists around the world. In Russia, he is considered a national hero, and his influence on the country's culture and politics is still evident today. Thank you for your interest in culture and knowledge. I hope the information I provided you has been useful and interesting. If you want to continue learning and exploring, we invite you to subscribe to our cultural YouTube channel for more educational and entertaining content. See you soon.